Hello friends, this is Worm, and it's time for a haircut, but today it's Wednesday, so let's bring back another episode of What If Wednesday, the series where we talk about weird, wild, wacky what ifs of Destiny 2. And I kind of had a random thought for one today, and that is, what if Bungie exclusively listened to either the hardcore community or exclusively listened to the casual side of the community? And I figured we kind of talk about what the game would look like, or, you know, if Bungie went either way, but I kind of want to start with the hardcore player because I would consider myself more of a hardcore player and just kind of talk about the way that the game would be different. Now, I think there's some obvious things that would be different, you know, like just general difficulty around the game would be upped by like a lot, right? Like you wouldn't have strikes where you could run through it in 7 minutes. Like it would be made incredibly difficult. And of course, like it would be made, quite frankly, inaccessible to the casual community. And that's why they haven't done it yet. But specifically, like, you know, in terms of what I think we would be looking at is if Bungie catered to the hardcore community, not only would content be harder, right? So raids would be more difficult, nightfalls would be more difficult, like Grandmaster nightfalls, which are already like pretty difficult. I mean, granted, like depending on your team setup and stuff like that, maybe you would disagree, but I think for the average player, they're already pretty difficult, you know, especially some of them such as the Corrupted, for example, that runs like 40 minutes per run. Like on an average run, you know, obviously optimized, you can get that lower, but for an average run, like getting that harder would, I mean, it'd be wild. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but I remember back in Destiny 1, Nightfalls literally took like 2 hours to do because it was that difficult. Like you would have, you know, your 3 people, you'd have an infinite number of revives, but if someone died, you had to go out and pick them up. And if everybody died, of course, you'd go back to orbit and stuff like that. And we didn't have champions, but we also didn't have the same power level that we did, or that we do currently have in Destiny 2. But, you know, obviously in terms of content difficulty, it would be scaling up, and you wouldn't just see it inside of like the high end content. Like you would see content difficulty scaling up in your average stuff, you know, your strike playlist, onslaught, what else is I wouldn't say Gambit or Crucible because they're more PvP. Those are based on your like skill and whatnot, but we'll talk about those in just a second because I do have some thoughts on those. But like if Bungie exclusively listened to their hardcore community, everything would get harder, okay? And that's, yeah, I mean, obviously that would happen, but I also think that loot would become a lot more valuable. And this is really like the big focus. You know, obviously everything getting harder isn't necessarily a good thing, but if Bungie listened to the hardcore community on loot, I think that Destiny would improve substantially. For, of course, the hardcore player. I think for the regular player, again, I can't experience what the casual player is experiencing because I've already put so much time in this game. Like I have every single build fleshed out the way I want it to pretty much, so I cannot go and experience what the casual player feels. But in Destiny 1, the loot system was much more harsh. Now yes, there was more RNG, and we can talk all day about RNG and how good or how bad it was. I think that overall RNG was kind of a bad thing because you could literally like invest 10,000 hours in the game and just have bad luck and never get a Gjallarhorn, as an example. And you know, my original D1 vets will understand that. But sorry, that's just I'm sitting here reminiscing on D1. I need to stay focused on the topic. But the loot system, I think that the hardcore players would agree that, you know, loot is too common, which I know that sounds crazy, but like literally when I play during the week, I get, I don't know, like 7-8 exotics in like a matter of 3 days, which is absolutely wild to me. Like I get them as world drops, I get them as rewards for, you know, doing the challenges and stuff like that. And like honestly, I dismantle 95% of all the exotics that I get. Like I have let's see, on my hunter, I think I have 6 exotic Ingrams just that have been sitting there for like almost a year, actually more than a year now. They've literally just been sitting in my inventory for more than a year. On my Titan and my Warlock, it's kind of the same thing. Like, I don't just decrypt all my exotics because I just don't want to waste the time on it. I would rather wait until a new exotic comes out that I could potentially focus. And so I just literally just let them sit in my inventory, and I only open them when I absolutely need to. Come here. Come on. My cat wants to come. Come on. Come on. Anyways, but, you know, in Destiny 1, of course, the loot was so much more meaningful because you didn't just get exotics after doing 3 strikes. Like exotics were very they were random when they came. Like you had, and not only were they random, but they only really dropped from your like pinnacle content, you know, your raids and your nightfalls. You could buy them from Xur, which was awesome. And I still think Xur is a good thing. Like I would say that even hardcore players would agree that Xur is a good thing, but Xur meant so much more back in Destiny 1 because Xur meant, oh my gosh, like this is a guaranteed exotic. Cross my fingers, he brings something that I want or something that I need. And, you know, I think that Bungie, if they were to listen to the hardcore player base about loot, like the amount of loot that we're getting would be tightened down. You know, okay, you have your guaranteed, you know, one exotic from the week that you get for, you know, just playing X amount of time in the game. You know, doing 3 ritual playlists, whether it's 3 strikes, 3 crucible games, 3 gambit games, or one of each, doesn't matter. Then you get an exotic in, but then that's it. After that, you have to do raids. You have to do high tier nightfalls and stuff like that. Like that would bring back a really prominent element that just has been missing from the game. But of course, I think there's also the reality, the hardcore players, like if you bring that back, like it doesn't do anything to us. Again, we've already got our builds all fleshed out. You know, I'm not looking for another, I don't know what's an exotic that I use a lot. I'm not looking for another Graviton forfeit. I've got essentially my God roll on Graviton forfeit. You can't give me much better than that. I've got my God roll on, you know, Lorelei Splendor or this exotic or that exotic. Like I'm not looking to replace those. So lowering the amount of exotics that the hardcore players get, it doesn't really affect us, you know. But yeah, that's the loot grant. I think the other aspect, maybe the better aspect here is, of course, with legendary weapons. You know, we have tons of legendary weapons. In fact, if you are like play the game daily, you get probably 20 weapons a day in like a 2-hour session. Like that's 10 legendary weapons in an hour. And I would say that's maybe even on the low end. Like you can get a lot. You can get a lot of legendary weapons. You can break down for shards, or of course, you know, God rolls, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, again, back in Destiny 1, that didn't happen. Like your legendaries, you got them at the end of Nightfalls. You could buy them from vendors. You could get them from raids. And other than that, they were just random drops in the world. And it felt like they had a really low drop rate. And again, I don't necessarily think we should go back to the low drop rate, but if Bungie listened to exclusively the hardcore player base, I think that loot would be like dwindling, you know, the amount of loot that you get. And again, this is why they don't listen to the hardcore player base, because then if you have loot that's so exquisitely rare, casual players aren't even going to want to play the game. Why would I play the game whenever I have like a 0.2% chance of getting an exotic, you know, or whatever the drop rate would be. But yeah, there's that. Of course, I think that also if Bungie exclusively listened to the hardcore player base, you would have much more, and not just difficult encounters, but you'd have much more intense, you know, mechanically intense encounters. Like think of like raid encounters. Like I'm trying to think about what is Acquisition from Vow of the Disciple. That's the 3rd encounter. Think about it, like the first couple weeks that raid came out, like that was the hang up, you know, not Caretaker. You know, Caretaker was the hang up on day 1 on contest mode, but Acquisition was the gatekeeper, so to speak. Like I remember literally I would try with so many teams and people they weren't fast enough. They weren't, you know, they couldn't do the call outs correctly. Like there's all kinds of, like, imagine that level of difficulty, but in like a strike or an onslaught. Like it would get so overwhelming to the new player, because it's like, oh my gosh, like I have to learn so much new stuff. Like even look at the Corrupted. Okay, look at the Corrupted. How many players still don't know to pass the ball back and forth? Because literally every time I do that strike, every single time, I like to be the one to pick up the ball, because I cannot count on my teammates to throw it at me. And then it takes a long time to kill the boss or do whatever. And then granted, in like low level nightfalls or in just the regular strike, that doesn't really matter. But in high tier, you know, master, legend, grandmaster, it matters, you know. And I guess also if you're doing grandmaster, you're probably hardcore, you already know to pass the ball. But in master and in legend versions, like I'll join those just because I'm trying to do, you know, get whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I will still have players that just don't throw the ball to me. I'm like, you realize it's going to take forever to break the boss's shield if you don't pass the ball. But that's one of those mechanics that Bungie introduced way back in, what was it, Forsaken? I believe is when that Strike was released in Destiny 2. But that's one of the reasons probably why Bungie hasn't listened to the hardcore community in terms of, adding more difficult mechanics to the game, because they see how players handle that. Like, no, we're not going to add more difficult. Like, I couldn't imagine like a situation. I mean, even an Onslaught, the most recent addition to Destiny 2, like literally I was in one the other night and the guy picked up the spark and he kept shooting the boss like before he could take the spark in. And like, it's like he couldn't figure out that you just run past the boss and you dunk the spark. Like, he was standing at the stairs, he was shooting the boss, like all the ads were dead, and me and my team were just looking at him like, bro, are you serious right now? And like, it wasn't like he was being malicious, like it genuinely seemed he didn't know, just run the spark in. So finally he died because he the spark or he eventually got frozen, and he dropped the spark. So I picked up the spark and I just ran it in. And then the next time it happened, he picked up the spark and he just ran it in. It's like, okay, well now like he knows, but it's mechanics like that like hardcore players want stuff like that in Destiny 2. But if it were to happen, like you would have absolute mayhem. Like you would literally have strikes, like regular level strikes that are just not even able to be completed. So that's what would happen if Bungie listened to the hardcore player base on that. Now, of course, another good thing that would happen if Bungie listened to the hardcore player base, we would see more stuff like Whisper of the Worm, 0 Hour, like these incredible missions would come back to the game. And not only would they come back to the game, and not just these missions, but like new missions similar to these, maybe exotic quests and stuff, but they would be, added to the game randomly. I mean, remember Whisper? Like, it was just one day somebody's like, oh my gosh, like, look at this, there's this whole freaking quest line down here that Bungie didn't talk about or anything like that. And then all of a sudden everybody started doing it. Like, that was incredible. That was a very good feeling. Same thing with 0 Hour. Like you go and you talk to that captain, like nobody told you about it. Well, nobody told players about it. Nobody Bungie told players about it, but players started catching on. They started doing it. It's like, oh my gosh, this is an incredible strike, blah blah blah, or incredible mission, blah blah blah. And if Bungie did listen to the hardcore players exclusively, we would probably see more of that in Destiny 2. And again, like I know that maybe for newer players, that's who cares about that, but like that's one of the things that adds to the mystery of Destiny 2. Like if Bungie just came out one day and said, hey, we just added 6 secret missions across the game, go find them, players would lose their marbles. Like literally every hardcore player and their mom would be hopping on, going into patrols, going into strikes, going into all this stuff to activate these secret missions. And it would probably take a while to find them, especially if Bungie did a good job of hiding them. Not just, go into patrol and go to this lost sector and you find a new doors open or something like that. But, like have a situation like, what was it? The Black Spindle mission in Destiny 1. Like you had a strike that you were going into. You're doing a strike, and instead of actually finishing the strike, you just take a different turn. And all of a sudden the strike becomes a mission. Like that was incredible. And if Bungie listened to the hardcore player base exclusively, we would probably see more of those, and that would be good for everybody. Because again, these missions, they're not necessary. You don't have to do Whisper the Worm. You don't have to do 0 Hour, especially now. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I think you can still go and get things like Outbreak from the exotic kiosk. I could be wrong. I actually haven't even looked yet, but I'm pretty sure you can still go in and get those exotics, but like you can go in and get them crafted now if you want to actually do the mission. So I think that's obviously where we would be leaning with that. But I think that's enough talking about, the hardcore player exclusivity. Let's talk about what would happen to Destiny if Bungie exclusively listened to the casual player, and if they exclusively catered to the casual player. And this is where it really sounds, to me personally, I feel like it would go way downhill. First of all, easy content would be out the like content would be basically soloable across the board. Like if Bungie exclusively listened and catered to the casual community, like think about it, raids, you wouldn't have to have communication in raids anymore. Like everybody's role would potentially be randomly assigned. It would have a walkthrough on how you do the role. Like it would be, honestly, it'd be a cakewalk. It'd be fantastic, because there's sometimes like I don't want to do a raid just because I don't want to get in there. I don't want to put my mic on. I don't want to, commit to blah, 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 go into matchmaking, commit to X amount of time and stuff like that. If Bungie had Bungie caters exclusively to the casual community, I wouldn't have to do that. Like, I could literally load up King's Fall, you know, what checkpoint do you want to start? Oh, I want to start at the beginning. Okay, boom, here's your fire team, sit in matchmaking for 3 minutes. Then, okay, you load in and it gives everybody an assigned role. Hey, you need to go here. You need to take this here. You need to, you know, kill this enemy, blah, 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 blah. And it would be made so much easier, which I know, like, that sounds like it'd be awesome. But at the same time, like, sucking the difficulty out of content, like, that's what leads Destiny to be boring. That's why I've quit a bunch of other games I've played in the past, because they get boring, because difficulty is zapped out of it. And, you know, that's one of the big differences, like we just talked about a little while ago, between Destiny 1 and Destiny 2. Destiny 1 had an element of difficulty that has never been seen in Destiny 2. Like never been seen in Destiny 2. Like, who remembers doing the hard mode raid in Destiny 1? Like, if you saw somebody that was light level 30, like, you're like, oh wow, that dude literally put himself to the axe, we'll just say, and he did that. Like, that's impressive. Like, that is seriously impressive. I don't get that. Just a little side note here, I don't get that feeling anymore. Like, I look at people and it doesn't matter what they're wearing. I don't see anybody. I'm like, wow. Like, I literally see flawless emblems. I don't care. I'm like, it is what it is. I see people with a flawless title. I don't care. You know, I see people with raid titles and raid shaders, and I don't care anymore. You know, but back in Destiny 1, that was a different story. Like, it meant a lot. And Bungie zapping the difficulty out of basically everything to cater to the casuals would not necessarily be good for the game. It might be awesome in the short run. Like, oh man, I can get in here, I can do 3 raid encounters in, you know, an hour, because it's broken down so simply that everybody can do it very easily with no communication. Like, that'd be great. Then I can farm out, you know, what is it? Root of Nightmares, I think, is this week's raid. I can farm out Root of Nightmares like nothing, right? But in terms of longevity, it would get boring. Why build an insanely strong, powerful Guardian if there's no insanely strong, powerful content to use it on? That would be the first thing that would happen. And that's, again, I think that's kind of a double-edged sword. Like, that's bad, but it's also good. You know, and maybe Bungie could potentially meet in the middle and, like, have some elements of that. That way the hardcore players are still like, oh, hey, this is awesome. Because, like, for example, grinding raids. Hardcore players can grind raids like it's nothing. It's just the time consumption, you know? As another side note here, I would love if Bungie allowed players to have the encounters, like, selectable from the raid menu. Like, if you want to load into King's Fall, you don't have to start at the beginning. You can start at Golgoroth. You can start at, you know, the Sisters. You can start at Oryx if you wanted to. Maybe after you complete it once a week. But getting back on topic here, but outside of that, if Bungie exclusively listened to the hardcore players, I think that, again, loot would be reigning. And, like, loot already reigns, but, you know, getting the pinnacle of whatever would be a cakewalk, you know? Like, you wouldn't have to put effort into it. And it already feels like that kind of in Destiny 2. And I'm not saying that this is all the casual players' fault or anything like that, because I know that the casual player, they do make up the primary Destiny 2 player base. Like, whether we like it or not, that's the way it is. And Bungie does have to cater to the more casual players to keep the game alive, especially when you have people like Dado that have perpetually, like, you know, said, oh, don't spend money on the Eververse store. Like, the Eververse store is what keeps Bungie and Destiny 2 alive. And hardcore players, I literally hear more hardcore players say, I'm not ever spending any money on the Eververse store. It's stupid. They should take it out of the game. Like, okay, do you want a cookie? You want a little medal or something? Like I don't get that. I'll join up on a raid and somehow the Eververse store gets bought. I've never bought anything from Eververse store. Okay, what do you want? What do you want? A medal? You want somebody to come to your house and give you a back massage? Like, who cares if you never buy anything? Like, you're the reason the game's suffering. Sorry, again, another tangent here. I didn't take my medicine today, apparently. But if Bungie listened to the casual player base, you know, I think that the loot incentive would just, I mean, it would be gone. Because everybody wants to have all access to the loot, but nobody wants the time to put in, you know. And again, for example, another game that I play Fallout 76 pretty regularly, and that is, oh god, that is a game that you've got to put the time in, or you've got to shell out the real money transactions, or in-game real money transactions. Not even like paying the company. Like, you have to go find a third-party vendor, like somebody who got the god roll of whatever you wanted, and you have to buy it from them, because there is, you know, the loot element in that game is absolutely all over the place. Like, it's crazy. And of course, I think Destiny 2 does a little bit better, because you put the time in, you're eventually going to get what you're looking for. But I don't know. I think that listening to the casual community would kill that loot incentive, because hardcore players would get so much more loot than we already have, it would be ridiculous. And it would be to a point where, hey, we get everything that we wanted, woohoo! But then what's the point of going on? You know, the reason I currently still play Destiny right now is because with the Brave Arsenal, I'm looking for god rolls. And then I'm taking those god rolls and I'm testing them out on certain builds. Like if I just got all the god rolls of everything that I was looking for today, I would play for a few days, I'd get bored of it, and then I'm gonna go play something else. And of course, Bungie doesn't want that. That's why they don't exclusively listen to the casual player base. What else would happen if Bungie listened to the exclusively to the casual player base? I think that you would see a really interesting shift in like PvP, like environments. You know, you might see the normalization of everybody's stats. For example, you know, everybody has tier 7 mobility, tier 7 recovery, tier 7 strength, tier 7 blah blah blah. All those stats would be the same because, again, what makes Destiny PvP so inaccessible to new players is, number one, players have been playing obviously for a very long time, so they have more skill, but also builds. You know, in Trials of Osiris, going in without tier 10 intellect or tier 9 intellect is a risky move because, well, you're going to get out supered. The enemy team's going to get their supers before you do, and supers basically make the round, right? Like if somebody gets a Well of Radiance or a bubble, that the round's gone, and you're going to lose that round. But I think that if that were to happen, you know, we would see PvP really feel more like, I guess, more like a Call of Duty game with long times to kill. And also on that note, I actually forgot, I was going to say something earlier. I think that if you listen to the hardcore player base in terms of PvP, like all that you'd ever see again was hand cannons. Like the hardcore player base would say, oh, well, hand cannons need to be able to 3-tap with no flinch and, you know, blah, 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 blah. And so the meta would become SMGs and hand cannons, maybe shotguns too. Like weapons like scout rifles, never be seen again. Auto rifles, probably never be seen again, because the hardcore community, for some reason, is really married up to their hand cannons. I don't understand. Somebody please explain in the comments why people love hand cannons so much. I cannot get behind it. Maybe it's because I use a sidearm, and sidearms just are better all around. But I don't know. Anyways, look, this video's gone on long enough. I want to hear your thoughts on what would happen if Bungie listened to one side of the community or the other. Like, is there anything I missed? I'm sure there's stuff I missed. I'm sure there's a billion things that I missed in here, but I like reading y'all's comments. I know I don't respond to everybody's comments, but I do try to read through them all. I try to read and understand where you're coming from, stuff like that. So yeah, with that being said, I'm going to end the video here. I hope you guys liked it. Of course, drop a like. It helps the channel a lot. Subscribe for more daily Destiny content. And guys, do me a favor. Watch the videos you see here on the end screen, because for whatever reason, YouTube thinks you'll like them. We'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.